And I think that that will be the sort of a basic line of playing the game of the economic security in the next generation.
Japan's economic security has become more important in recent years. This is due to increased geopolitical risks.
Hello, and welcome to a special talk event on trends in economic security, with a special focus on the role and importance of Japan. I'm Jonathan Soble, former Tokyo bureau chief for the Financial Times, currently a partner at Kreab Japan, a strategic communications firm here in Tokyo. My co-host today is Professor Suzuki Kazuto from the University of Tokyo. Professor Suzuki specializes in international political economy and science and technology policy, and he's actively engaged in research on economic security. He's currently a professor at the university's Graduate School of Public Policy, and he also serves as director of the Institute for Geoeconomics. Economic security is something that I think we are hearing more and more about in policymaking circles, the media, as well as academia. It's a very broad topic. It's invoked in discussions of, for example, manufacturing supply chains and the need to strengthen them against natural disasters and wars, energy policy, and of course, domestic investment and the promotion by governments and others of important new technologies like AI. So by way of a kind of a self-introduction to this field, which I know you've been looking at very closely, can you tell us a little bit about what it means and why it's important now?
Right. So this is a very important subject, particularly in the context where the relationship between the economy and geostrategic or geopolitical issue are in combinations. Export control. I mean, if you look at, for example, the Biden administration imposed the export control on the semiconductor, that is the very much of the a method of using the state power over other country. And this typical economic statecraft is the one of my subject of a research. I am currently teaching in my graduate school about global political economy and using these economic power as a geoeconomics power to in other countries and how these are connected. So that will be today's discussion, and I'm looking forward to it.
So we're talking partly about using the economy as a tool of broader, national strategic interests, but also protecting the security of various parts of the economy. Yeah.
Yeah,
All right.
exactly.
Thanks very much. Okay, so our special guest today is Professor Tsuchiya Takahiro. He's in Kyoto, and he's talking to us from the Kyoto University of Advanced Science. Professor Tsuchiya is an expert on economic security, and his focus in particular has been China. So thanks very much for joining us today. Professor, I know you received your PhD in security studies from the National Defense Academy. Then you were a diplomat. You worked at the Consulate General of Japan in Hong Kong before assuming your current position at Kyoto University of Advanced Science. So, I mean, having done this back and forth between, in a way, sort of government policy making, diplomacy, and academia, if you could tell us a little bit about the focus of your research to set the stage.
Thank you very much for having me today. My current research focuses on the intersection of emerging technologies like AI, quantum computing, and advanced semiconductors with national security policies. I study how governments can balance the need to drive innovation and promote economic growth while also protecting sensitive technologies from illegal transfers or misuse. In addition, I explore how international frameworks and alliances can be used to improve collective economic security.
Great. And Professor Suzuki, I know that you are very familiar with Professor Tsuchiya's research, and it aligns in some ways with the themes that you've been studying. I mean, what have you learned from him?
Well, as a China expert, he has a very deep knowledge of how things are going in China, especially on the emerging technology. And this is a typical case of the U.S.-China confrontations or rivalry that there are emerging Chinese technologies which are threatening the competitiveness and the military superiority of the United States. So I think this is not just about a question of technology and economy as such, but also it is a question with regard to the military balance. And I think Professor Tsuchiya's research is showing that how this balance between the United States and China is changing, and I think that's very important.
Thank you, Professor. And of course, we will talk a lot about China and US-China rivalry, which is really kind of at the global level, the driver of the renewed interest in economic security. But since we're in Japan, let's start with Japan. And Professor Tsuchiya, could you provide us a kind of overview of how the economic security situation looks from Japan and what its current sort of challenges are?
Yes, Japan's economic security has become more important in recent years. This is due to increased geopolitical risks, rapid technological innovation, and supply chain vulnerabilities exposed by the COVID-19 pandemic. Key challenges include ensuring a stable energy supply, securing critical minerals like rare earths, preventing advanced technology from leaking out, and strengthening cybersecurity measures. To address these challenges, Japanese government has passed the Economic Security Promotion Act. This law is designed to protect vital infrastructure, improve the management of sensitive technologies, and encourage the diversification of supply chains. In addition, a comprehensive economic security strategy has been developed to balance national security with economic growth. This strategy relies on public-private partnerships and international cooperation, underscoring the need for coordinated national efforts.
That's an interesting point at the end there too, the coordinated national efforts, because I mean, I reported about Japan as a journalist for some years, and I think historically Japan has probably been one of the more keenly aware countries when it comes to national economic security. At the same time, I think a distinguishing factor in some of these recent efforts has been the awareness that Japan is not necessarily just protecting its own economic security as one nation sealed off from the world, but rather it's part of a broader network of connected markets and connected countries that includes allied countries like the United States and other important economic partners. So could you tell us a little bit about the partnership aspect of this and how relations between Japan and let's call them the Western countries, for lack of a better term, are changing and developing within this context of economic security?
Well, Japan's relationship with Western countries are growing closer, especially from an economic security perspective, based on shared values such as democracy, the rule of law, and respect for human rights. Japan is deepening cooperation in several key areas. For example, Japan has established the Japan-US Economic Policy Consultative Committee, also known as the Economic 2+2 with the United States. This committee improves economic security and technological cooperation, addressing issues like supply chain resilience and technological innovation. Moreover, with the European Union, Japan is strengthening collaboration in free trade, environmental issues, and digital domains through the Japan-EU Strategic Partnership Agreement. Through these efforts, Japan and Western countries coordinate policies and take a leadership role in establishing international rules and standards, promoting a stable and open international economic order.
Can you give us a couple of concrete examples? For example, if you're talking about U.S.-Japan cooperation and the 2+2, I mean, are there particular industries that they're focused on? Particular things that I think, are Japan-U.S. specific rather than sort of issues of global concern? Where are we seeing the most movement?
Due to those increases of the risks of economic security, the Japanese government has passed the Economic Security Promotion Act, as I said. And the strategy, autonomy and strategic indispensability is very important key issues to approach. Those approaches help reduce external pressure and strengthen Japan's influence toward the world.
Are there specific industries that Japan is particularly concerned about or investing in, for example?
I think one of the major achievements between the United States and Japan, together with Netherlands, is the semiconductor export control. This is the way to promote Japan's semiconductor industry investment. For example, inviting a TSMC to Kumamoto and establishment of the Rapidus. But at the same time, there is a significant importance of the role of semiconductor in the military equipment. So Japan, Netherlands, and the United States agreed to limit the export of the semiconductor manufacturing equipments to China in order to prevent China to develop the high-end semiconductor, which can be applicable for the military applications. So I think this is one of the profit, or let's say the outcome of the economic 2+2.
So we have sort of growing cooperation among like-minded countries on one hand, with an understanding that beyond the limits of that walled garden, as it's been sometimes labeled, these cooperating countries will be careful about how far the technology goes beyond that. And speaking of who's outside the walled garden, and back to Professor Tsuchiya, I mean, we talked on one hand about cooperation with Western countries, but of course this is all to some extent, at least, a response to developments elsewhere, and that's where relations with Russia, but of course China come into play. Can you tell us a little bit about sort of what Japan sees and what it's doing when it looks outside that group of like-minded countries?
Well, relations with Russia and China bring complex economic and security challenges. Regarding Russia, Japan has imposed economic sanctions alongside the international community in response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. This situation affects long-standing cooperation in areas such as energy supply and Northern Territory issue. Still, Japan continues to address security concerns while keeping dialogue channels open. Recognizing that diplomatic engagement is very important. On the other hand, regarding China, economic interdependence remains deep, but security challenges are growing. These include the East China Sea issue, cyber attacks, and human rights issues. So Japan seeks a constructive relationship with China while taking steps to better manage sensitive technologies and review supply chains from economic security perspective. In addition, Japan is enhancing cooperation to realize a free and open Indo-Pacific through the Quad security dialogue with the United States, Australia, and India. So this initiative supports shared values and strategic interests, helping to boost regional security and stability.
And you talked about this balance between maintaining a cooperative relationship with China, in particular on the economy, where of course the Japanese and Chinese economies are closely tied together, while at the same time recognizing that China represents a challenge in terms of national security. Maybe Professor Suzuki, if I could get your comment here. I mean, that seems like you talked at the very beginning about economic security being the intersection between economics and national security. It feels like there's like a fundamental balancing act, maybe even a dilemma for Japan there. Could you describe it a little bit and tell us kind of what the real fundamental thinking is here on kind of the balance of cooperation and concern vis-a-vis China?
Well, of course, there are sort of a contradiction of the economic interest and the security interest. On the one hand, the security interest is to make sure that the East Asia or the regional stability will be maintained. And in order to do so, we need to balance the power between these major actors. Meanwhile, economically speaking, we are more investing in China. China is the largest trading partner for Japan, and I think this is extremely important for the Japanese companies to find the source of growth. China is the largest market in terms of the growth in a variety of sectors. If the economy is used as a weapon of to strike a balance in the region, then I think those investment will be seized or halted, and I think there will be more risks for the Japanese companies to invest in China or vice versa. So I think this balance is extremely difficult for the companies. If the companies are restricted to invest or trade with China, then that will lose all the economic opportunities. Whereas if the industry are so free to do trade with China, then it will increase the vulnerability of the Japanese security. So it requires a balance or a tight relationship between the government and the private sector, and it needs to have more deeper dialogue of how to achieve the balance between the security and the economic interest.
Because of course, if the private sector sees economic security merely in terms of a tightening of the rules and limits on its ability to do business, that's a problem for the private sector. But they also don't want to be used as tools of kind of economic competition, right? So presumably they have their own agenda when it comes to economic security. Is that right?
Yeah, I think it's not just the economic competition. The economic competition happens in the market, but I think it is the power of the government who controls the export and imports and investment. All these instruments are in the hands of the government, and therefore, if there is a much more stronger security concerns implied in the use of economy, then that will be it would lose the balance between the security and economic interest.
All right. Professor Tsuchiya, you mentioned rules and norms and institutions, because of course this isn't just about a question of economic competition in the market or even government investment or support for specific industries. I mean, there are intergovernmental agreements, networks being formed to try and protect not just individual countries' economic security, but again, these networks of like-minded companies. So could you tell us a little bit about, the international community's efforts on the kind of rulemaking and norm forming score? And do these international rules like, trade agreements or investment agreements really help address the threats? That's another thing I think we'd be interested in hearing about.
Yes. The formation of rules, norms, and institutions related to economic security and emerging technology especially, is progressing rapidly in the international community. For instance, agreements like the Wassenaar Arrangement aims to control export and advanced technologies and prevent their spread to entities that might threaten security. So international standards are also being developed to strengthen global cybersecurity, while rules for data governance and digital trade are being set to ensure data protection, privacy, and free flow of trusted information recently.
And, international norms are something that, one country can't set on its own. And I think the fact that we're having this discussion, we're recording this discussion a few days before new Donald Trump takes over as American president for the second time, makes that a particularly kind of fraught discussion because international rules and norms are not something that he's famously a fan of. How does this economic security discussion, maybe Professor Suzuki, if you want to chime in here, would be great. How does this economic security discussion, in particular, the kind of rules and norms part of that, change, do you think, under a Trump administration?
And I think rules and norms are not, Mr. Trump is not in favor of rules and norms. He is very much like to break it and, live from it. So I think the United States is now becoming as another, not a security threat, but I think it's an economic risks. Probably case of the Nippon Steel acquisition of the U.S. Steel was blocked by President Biden time. But I think this sort of thing may happen again in the Trump administration because of its America First policy. And I think, this is probably against the WTO rules and the many other, international norms. That may be something that we need to be aware of in order to continue and maintain an economic relationship with the United States. So I think, the Japanese companies needs to be aware that this is not just a one-off case. I think it will be a potential Mr. Trump's political decision in the future that he might reject some sort of he might reject the investment from Japan or putting the higher tariffs in order to achieve certain political goals.
I mean, America First is at least ostensibly a strengthening of American domestic security, both economically and otherwise, but it's at the expense of cooperation, which internationalists would argue is a better way of protecting long-term security, not just for America's allies, but for the U.S. itself. But maybe Professor Tsuchiya, if you wanted to tell us a little bit also about how Trump's reelection affects Japan's economic security in particular, but also maybe more broadly.
The second Trump administration may emphasize bilateral deals over broader accords, as Professor Suzuki mentioned. But I think nonetheless, major frameworks such as the G20 and G7 will continue to serve as essential platforms for global cooperation, while Trump might challenge or redefine certain norms. The U.S. chairmanship of the G20 in 2026 and the G7 in 2027 provides a window of opportunity for shaping the agenda more directly, I think.
Does Japan, do you think, have to do more now to shape the agenda? I know that in the first Trump administration, particularly after the president withdrew the United States from the Trans-Pacific Partnership, there was a lot of talk about Japan now having to take up the flag, if you like, for the liberal international order, free trade and all sorts of other things. Are you getting the sense that there's going to be a renewed expectation on Japan to do something similar under the second Trump administration?
For Japan, it is becoming more necessary to develop an independent economic security strategy while still maintaining and strengthening its alliance with the United States. Japan must carefully navigate these dynamics to preserve stability. And by taking a proactive role in multilateral forums, Japan can help maintain and stable in the international order, effectively filling gaps left by the United States retrenchment.
Professor Suzuki, what do you think? To what degree do you think Japan can and should fill gaps left by American retrenchment?
Well, of course, Japan has a huge stake in maintaining the international rules and the norms. And I think Japan, as in the case of after Mr. Trump left TPP, Japan took over the leadership and formulated the CPTPP. I think this was a very good this set a very good precedent that Japan will be take the leading role where bigger countries like United States or China is leaving or detaching from international rules and norms. Japan will play an important role as a leader of the liberal international order. Nevertheless, I think there is quite a difference from Mr. Abe's time and Mr. Ishiba's time. Mr. Abe was very much had a stable domestic political order with the both majority in both houses, and also he was he has a leader of the biggest faction of the Liberal Democratic Party, ruling party. Meanwhile, Mr. Ishiba is prime minister of the minority government, and therefore it is rather difficult to take a leadership in the international stage because his domestic affairs may hinder him to be to play a leading role, especially in terms of establishing a new rules and also providing the government funding for supporting other activities such as support in Ukraine or support the official development assistance, etc. So I think this kind of a political weakness is a difference between Mr. Abe and Mr. Ishiba. And when it comes to the negotiation with the United States, this will make it rather difficult to face with Mr. Trump, who likes to have a very, a deal with a strong leadership. So I think that's somewhat concern of Japan to face, but I think it's at the same time, Mr. Ishiba, who is a veteran politician, knows how to deal with this situation. So I'm expecting that Mr. Ishiba is taking a leading role in such a difficult circumstances.
Right. Thank you. Yeah. And of course, Japan is not the only country that has had changes of government since the first Trump administration. I think there's generally a sense that that there's a search on now for who's going to be his interlocutors and people who can kind of balance him out a little bit, who maybe don't exist this time around. The rise of China long term is, of course, a major driver for this focus on economic security that we've been talking about. But in the immediate term right now, I mean, a lot of the discussion about China has to do with economic slowdown because China's, economy is facing troubles of its own. Professor Tsuchiya, as a China watcher, how do you see China's economic slowdown affecting Japan and the global economy, either generally and, of course, from how that might change the needs and approaches to economic security?
Well, China's economic slowdown has a profound impact on the global economy. As the world's second largest economy, it's how to say the reduces global demand and disrupts international supply chains. For Japan, where China is the largest trading partner, this results in concerns over declining exports in key industries such as automobiles, machinery, electronics, and chemicals. At the same time, this slowdown presents strategic opportunities for us. Firstly, reliance on China has exposed vulnerabilities, promoting Japanese companies to diversify supply chains and reduce risks linked to over-dependence. And secondly, Japanese firms are expanding into emerging markets like Southeast Asia, India, and South America to tap into new growth areas. And thirdly, promoting digital transformation opens the door to new business models, improves efficiency, and strengthens global competitiveness.
So we haven't really talked much about Europe yet, and I'd like to get into that a little bit. Professor Tsuchiya, the EU, of course, is European countries individually, and the EU collectively are strengthening their own economic security strategies. So what's the background here? And again, since we're looking at Japan as the main focus today, what does that mean for Japan in terms of knock-on effects and potential opportunities for collaboration?
The European Union aims to establish digital sovereignty and protect strategic industries, thereby strengthening its economic security strategy. This is driven by intensified US-China technological competition, supply chain vulnerabilities, highlighted by the COVID-19 pandemic, and concerns over data protection and privacy. So for Japan, this opens opportunities for enhanced cooperation with the EU. Japan can collaborate with the EU in regulatory cooperation, relying on digital regulations and standards to facilitate trade and innovation. And second, joint development of green technologies and sustainable innovations can be pursued.
You think that's a particular area of strength for Japan-EU cooperation then, green technology? Yeah.
Yes.
Professor Suzuki, what do you think? I know you've got quite a broad global view. Anything sort of strike you about what's happening? You mentioned, of course, the Netherlands being part of this sort of semiconductor effort. Anything beyond that between Japan and the EU that strikes you as interesting or to have a potential areas of focus or growth?
Oh, of course, EU is the creation of the liberal international order. The European Union as a single market and a single entity as an economic actor has been based on the rule-based international order. And I think this is a very much of the nature of the EU. And I think Japan and the EU has a lot in common in terms of protecting the rule-based international order, especially with regard to the Mr. Trump's arriving in the White House again, and also the China using the economy as a weapon to coerce other countries. So I think politically speaking, Japan and the EU has a lot in common to work and promote or protect the liberal international order. And especially, when it comes to technological cooperation, the green tech is one thing, and another technology is the AI. The European Union as well as UK has conducted some sort of an AI safety summit and AI safety meetings, so that how to protect the civil society from the manipulation of the information, etc., is going to be another big subject for the next generation. And I think Japan and the EU can work together on that subject. Meanwhile, in terms of green tech, European Union has been trying to promote less combustion engine and more electronic vehicles. But in terms of the industry, Chinese electric vehicle is now expanding its global market, and it is harming the industrial base in the European Union. So I think that will be something that Japan and European Union can work together in order to prevent the overcapacity of the Chinese industry, and to make sure that we'll be able to have a stable and regulated market in this green industry domain.
As a country that has for a long time been, again, pretty explicit and kind of aware of economic security, Japan has been perhaps in some areas a first mover. Are there areas, Professor Suzuki, where you think Japan's economic security policies, either recent or past ones, can serve as examples or affect what the EU and maybe even the US might do? Or is it a question more of triangulating between them after they move?
Well, I think, each country has a different conditions and the circumstances. Japan probably has a reason to be the first mover on the economic security because of its closeness between the government and the industry. I think it is much easier to foment or to build up the sort of the common strategy between the public and private sectors, and to achieve the national goal of economic security. Whereas in European Union is a collection of the 27 member states, and 27 member states has their authority to their own national industry. So I think there's a sort of a different layers of the economic security policy set by the European Union and the national level regulations. So that would add additional difficulties for the European Union to establish the relationship between the government, particularly at the EU level, and the domestic industry. I think United States, on the other hand, has a very different take on the economic security because of its importance of the technological superiority in the global market, especially against China. And also, the United States is trying to, and United States is more conscious about the economic security as a national security. So I think the government takes much more leading role to impose a regulation against the industry instead of taking a close consultation between the government and the private sector. So I think each country has a different characteristics and different historical backgrounds. So I wouldn't say, Japan is the leader, but well, Japan is the first mover for sure. But, I think these practices can be interpreted according to their different circumstances.
And Japan is also sometimes the first country to feel the backlash from China against, whether it's economic security moves or other aspects of kind of geopolitical relations. I'm thinking about, for example, when supplies of critical minerals and rare earth materials were cut off by China, more than a decade ago over a sort of territorial dispute. Do you see signs of concern from China about moves that Japan is making to strengthen its economic security? What can we expect in terms of reaction, do you think?
We are expecting the Chinese reactions that China will take some sort of a retaliatory measures. But I think the problem of this economic security is that economic security, it is always the case that the industry or private sector is the first victim of the economic coercion. In rare earth mineral case, it was the Japan's automobile industry which had a great impact of the economic coercion because of the Chinese retaliatory or the Chinese economic coercion measures. So I think if the countries start to use these economic coercive measures, then that will create very much of the a huge impact on the industrial sector. But at the same time, Japan has, as a democratic country, Japan needs to take this action seriously and to make sure that the industry will be protected as much as possible from the economic coercion from outside. That's why Japan became as a first mover of the economic security. Meanwhile, the United States has a different idea on the economic security, whereas the issue of the economic security is more closer to the national security, so that the United States will take economic coercive measures as a security threat and to use more retaliatory measures such as export control or tariff. And that will be very escalatory actions. So each country has a different responses to economic coercion, and China will take some sort of measures against the economic in the context of the economic security, and as a result, it will have different reactions from different countries.
Professor Tsuchiya, what do you think about sort of future scenarios for Japan, ways that it can do things more, do things differently to strengthen its economic security, given the vulnerabilities that Professor Suzuki was just talking about?
Yes, several scenarios are conceivable for the future. Firstly, the intensifying U.S.-China rivalry may lead to global bipolarization with the world splitting into the U.S. red and China red blocks. Maybe country is focused to choose sides, hindering international cooperation. Secondly, there could be a reconstruction of multilateral cooperation with democratic nations like Japan, the EU, Australia, and India, strengthening multilateral frameworks. They may form new rules and norms to maintain a stable international order, emphasizing shared values and collective security. Thirdly, deepening economic security concerns may intensify technological competition, leading to the formation of technology blocks and challenging international cooperation. And fourthly, the emerging of new powers may lead to a multipolar international society. The rise of economics like India, South Asia, Africa, and Latin America introduces new dynamics requiring adaptive strategies. So in these scenarios, Japan needs to respond flexibility and strategically, balancing alliance and interdependence, promoting multilateralism, enhancing economic security, and engaging with emerging economies are very key considerations.
And if you were advising the Japanese government, what recommendations would you have? What strategies would you argue that Japan should adopt going forward?
Firstly, strengthening economic security by ensuring stable supply of critical minerals, critical materials, diversifying supply chains, and developing and protecting advanced technologies. This includes enhancing domestic production, exploring alternative sources, and tightening export controls. Promoting technological innovation and human resource development by investing in research and development and cultivating specialized talent. Collaboration among universities, research institutions, and companies, and especially foreign companies and foreign researchers can create a robust innovation ecosystem.
Professor Suzuki, what about you? If you had, your top couple of recommendations for the Japanese government, things it could be doing better, things it could be doing more of.
Japan can play a much more bigger role in leading other countries, which are also depending on the international rules and norms, to set up more minilaterals or multilateral frameworks. And as Professor Tsuchiya said, I think investment in the human resources and developing the innovation ecosystem is another thing. But in order to do so, I think we need to change the, let's say, a migration policy, or to be more attractive for the foreign high-skilled laborers, engineers, scientists, to come to Japan and to work together with the Japanese engineers and scientists to work on, more innovative effort. Especially, this is important to build up a strategic indispensability. And this strategic indispensability is going to be a very important element for future of the economic security, because this is a question of a security. So as a traditional security matters, the economic security also involves some sort of an element of the deterrence. And I think the having an indispensable role in the global supply chain will have more deterrence power to avoid the economic coercion from other countries.
So when you
So
say
I think,
strategic indispensability, what exactly do you mean?
well, the strategic indispensability means we build the technological capabilities and products which are indispensable in the global supply chain. So if, for example, the Japanese carbon fiber, which is used for the aircraft and the spacecrafts, the centrifuge for the enrichment of the nuclear fuels. This carbon fiber is extremely important for the high-tech industry. But if without the Japanese carbon fiber, no one can build the aircraft or the high-tech, high-speed railways, etc. So I think this has a lot of meaning. If Japan stop export this high-grade carbon fiber to other countries, then that would have a strong impact on the other economies. So this, again, will be the geo-economic power for Japan to have in order to pressurize other countries. And also it works as a deterrence for other countries, such as China stopping the rare earth mineral, which China has the indispensability. So each country has their own choke points, and building a choke point or having this indispensability will create a choke point of the other country's supply chain. And I think that that will be the sort of a basic line of playing the game of the economic security in the next generation.
All right. Professor Tsuchiya, finally, I'd just like to hear, some final remarks from you, and maybe, as someone who's looked at this closely, particularly, with respect to Japan and China. I mean, are you optimistic for the future of Japan's economic security and the economic security of its partner countries?
Yes, of course. As Professor Suzuki mentioned, diversifying supply chains and coordinating diplomacy can uphold stability even during a period of heightened tension. So multilateral diplomacy and shared rule setting remain the most effective tools to manage uncertainty.
Thanks very much. And finally, before I close it out, Professor Suzuki, any final remarks from you?
Well, this year, 2025, is the year that starts the Trump administration in the United States, and there will be a lot of changes taking place. Japan, of course, the United States, of course, is the treaty ally of Japan, and this U.S.-Japan alliance will be the center of the international strategy of Japan, continuously, whoever comes to the White House. But economically speaking, I think the trade policy, managing the global supply chain, I think Mr. Trump's policy seems to be different from his alliance policy. So I think we need to separate the alliance strategy and the economic policies, and make sure that we try to build up our own capabilities of being more resilient for any type of changes in the United States, nor in China, and to make sure that Japanese economy will survive in this very turmoil time.
All right. And thank you very much to our audience for tuning in. I hope you learned something. On behalf of my co-host, Professor Suzuki Kazuto, and our special guest, Professor Tsuchiya Takahiro, thank you very much and goodbye.